Welcome to Wake Up with Patti, a place where light overcomes darkness. Here, we share powerful stories of people who embraced their strength and came out on top. Get ready to wake up, discover your purpose, and rise.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining my show again this week. And today I have Brian Townsend on the show with me. We're going to tackle a tough topic, a very important topic. But Brian, first, let's have you tell my guests a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, good morning. Happy to be here. So my name is Brian Townsend. I grew up in Northern Virginia, right outside of Washington, D.C. And after high school, I packed my bags and drove to Joplin, Missouri, where I went to college. So that was really my reinvention, as I call it. I was kind of a shy kid, not a standout, not academically, not athletically, not a lot of friends, close friends, loyal friends, but not a popular kid or anything like that. And just wanted to do more and see more and really get out of my shell. And so I went to the middle of the country. I knew one person. It was another classmate of mine who did the same thing. And it was a great experience. A couple degrees later, I decided to go into law enforcement. I was a police officer in Joplin, Missouri in the 1990s for about 5 years. Great department, great experience. But my goal was the Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA. So in 1999, I was able to accomplish that dream. Went to DEA, and then with my DEA career, I spent the next 23 years of my law enforcement career. I spent the first 10 years in Little Rock, Arkansas, and then I went to Corpus Christi, Texas, and worked along the southwest border. And then I went to Quantico, Virginia, where I was in charge of most in-service training and got to start the leadership and development training unit for DEA and the 10,000 people in our workforce. And then the last couple of years, I returned to Missouri, which I call home. Like I said, I grew up in Virginia, but going to Missouri was a big moment in my life, and I was able to come back and finish my career there with DEA. My last couple of years, I was the resident agent in charge of the Springfield, Missouri DEA office, which means I was in charge of the DEA office in the several 25, 26 counties in Southwest Missouri that we cover. So I had a great job. I loved DEA, but I just felt like I needed to start the next chapter of my life and had a passion for training and teaching. And so I opened up my own training business, Eagle 6 Training and consulting and speaking. And that's been going really well. And then that led to a part-time job with an organization called Mid-States Organized Crime Information Center. And that's part of a greater system called the RISC Center or system. And I won't bore you with the details, but our job is to support law enforcement across the United States. We have analytical and equipment and other services that a lot of law enforcement agencies just can't afford. So I went to work with them part-time as a law enforcement training coordinator. And a lot of what they wanted me to develop was drug training, which is obviously my lane, right? Something I did at DEA for a long time and something I did in my 30-year law enforcement career, right? So I started to develop drug enforcement or drug training, and then that led to developing opioid training, and that just took off. And then that's another hat I wear. I end up starting a nonprofit organization called Only 2MG, signifying that only 2 milligrams of fentanyl is enough to kill you. I'm the executive director, and the board of directors is all retired DEA agents. And our goal is to empower communities to save lives. We want to provide drug education and drug awareness, specifically about fentanyl, and help people. So that's my life.
Wow. Fentanyl is a really big deal. A couple of weeks ago, I met a gentleman and his son died from fentanyl. And, not a lot of people actually know how to even recognize fentanyl, right? So I've heard about it. I come from a law enforcement family. I've been a police reservist and married to a law enforcement officer and all of the things. But, I'm sitting here thinking about it and I'm like, how do you recognize fentanyl? Because it is such a small amount that could sneak into probably almost anything. Is that right?
That's correct. And the problem with fentanyl is it's odorless, it's tasteless. So most people who are being poisoned by drugs and dying have no idea that they're getting fentanyl. They're ordering what they thought was heroin or cocaine or methamphetamine or pills, Percocets, and it doesn't have to be an opioid, by the way, Valium, oxycodone, whatever the pill is. There's a good chance there's a counterfeit, and then if there's a counterfeit, there's a good chance there's fentanyl or methamphetamine or some other type of garbage. So how do you identify that? Yeah, it's almost nearly impossible. And like I said, if you look at the overall numbers of people that we're losing in this country every year, which is over 100,000 people a year to drugs, about 2/3 of those people are because of fentanyl. So that means about 75,000 people a year lose their lives to one drug. And again, this is a drug that's sneaked its way into our drug supply. DEA estimates that it's in about 70% of our drug supply. It's in our methamphetamine, it's in our cocaine, it's certainly replaced heroin, and it's all over our pills, our counterfeit pills. And like I said, tasteless, odorless, no even distribution, and it only takes 2 milligrams. It's got to get into your system. It's got to get into that bloodstream to do its harm. But if you're someone who consumes illegal substances, then you're taking a risk every time you do that.
Mm-hmm. I even read something not that long ago about an officer, I believe it was maybe in Bradenton or Manatee County. And I'm probably going to get the story messed up a little bit because it was a while back. But it seemed like the officer was exposed to it on a drug bust, not even realizing it. Is that a thing? Or maybe media, or what is that about?
Yeah, it's actually not a thing. I mean, it's happened, but we now know through a lot of research that none of those officers were actually exposed to fentanyl. And early on, that used to be very controversial to say, but 99.999% of the law enforcement officers I talk to, they understand that. If you've been in law enforcement more than 2 minutes, you've been exposed to fentanyl and you're okay. So being around fentanyl, touching fentanyl, which I do not recommend, but in the event that it did touch your skin, you're not going to die. You're not going to overdose. I'm happy those officers are safe. I'm not trying to minimize what they believe they went through, but we know that none of their toxicology reports have been positive for fentanyl. None. There have been no cases of first responder overdosing from fentanyl. We hear about them, especially certainly in the past we heard about them, and we occasionally still hear about them every so often, but none of that's been confirmed. And there's, like I said, there's a lot of, this isn't just my opinion. There's a lot of evidence that supports that. And I love DEA. I had a great DEA career and still involved with some things with my DEA family. But in 2016, when we put that information out, we were wrong. Now, we were erring a lot on the side of caution, and we thought we were correct. We weren't intentionally trying to scare the public that fentanyl was dangerous to be around. But we now know through almost 10 years of research that it's incorrect. So.
What about, you've probably seen something on social media about a woman going and looking in the parking lot and finding like a dollar bill on the ground and picking it up, and all of a sudden, they're passing out. Is that a thing?
No, it's not a thing. It absolutely has to go through a mucous membrane, whether you take it orally, you sniff it, or snort it, I should say, or inject it. It's got to get into your blood supply. I do some work, consulting work, and I've been an expert witness in different trials and things like that. And I had one not too long ago, and they ended up not testifying or not calling me to the stand, but we had a child custody battle where the child's mother was struggling from substance use, and she was testing positive for fentanyl, and she claimed that just being around drugs made her test positive, and it just doesn't happen. And I'll happily testify that just doesn't happen. And the defense attorney, her attorney, thankfully gave her some good advice and said, you need to drop that bogus claim. I can think of a couple more of an employee for a large organization who tested positive on a random drug screen and said the same thing, that they were just around it. And no, absolutely not. Again, a very dangerous substance. I don't want to minimize that at all. Wear proper PPE. I wear nitrile gloves always. I would never recommend touching fentanyl or any illicit substance for that matter. I always wore PPE, and for me, it was nitrile gloves. But like I said, in the event that, I don't know, it tears or you don't have it, or somehow there's skin contact, you're going to be okay.
When I was growing up, we had all these commercials, say no to drugs, in the 80s. And it was a terrifying thing to even think about trying a drug. So in my case, I was always too afraid to try anything, thankfully. And I know that there are people out there that are just kind of looking for something to either have fun or to kind of ease their mental or physical pains. And it kind of escalates into a drug problem. But man alive, I just know that if I touched drugs, I wouldn't have had to worry about the drugs killing me. I think my parents would have.
Yeah.
So I never got into that. But when you're dealing with, the drug busts and things like that, can you tell me one of the hardest stories maybe that you witnessed yourself when it came to, having to deal with a drug bust? Because for me, I'm like happy if you find drugs, I'm happy that you're getting them off the street. But there must be some of the struggles too when you're seeing people being destroyed by drugs.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of families who have been impacted by this, a lot of communities impacted by this, and it always breaks your heart, especially when it's the kids. I think those are the hardest. At DEA, our task is to work the biggest, baddest drug organizations. So we're not always dealing with that end user, if you will. Mm-hmm. But I certainly have in my DEA career, and I certainly did in the 5 short years I was a police officer in Joplin. And I've worked with a lot of families over the last few years in my role with only 2MG, and it always breaks your heart when we don't think about the impact that the family has, or that the family feels, right? The profound impact, especially when they lose someone they love. And that's the hardest. And that's one of the reasons that really motivates me to do what I do. I'm probably the only nonprofit in the drug awareness space that didn't lose a child in this crisis. And I'm happy that there are a lot of nonprofits in this same space that are doing what they do. So I'm not trying to say, but it's a reactive thing. They've lost a child, and now they're giving back and trying to prevent that pain, and that's a wonderful thing. Please, I'm not minimizing that at all. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to do something a little different. I wanted to say, hey, we need to care about this regardless of our circumstances. We need to give a damn about each other. We need to have some empathy and some compassion in this world. And I think a lot of that, if you really start peeling away those layers, comes from the fact that I just constantly saw and dealt with so many people who lost loved ones in their life. And I guess this is my way of just kind of giving back and maybe helping them and helping others to hopefully prevent that pain.
Mm-hmm. I do love that, because it's not being reactive, it's very proactive. And the other thing that I like is, with me, I've done a lot of, I'll use this example, military advocacy, right? In the military, I wasn't in the military, so I could go all the way to the top and get things done. Whereas, the military members, they have to start with their chain of command. And I'm like, nope, I'm going up here. And I have found personally that that's a very good way to get things done. And so for you, addressing it from the very top so that the after effects are easier to deal with, I think that's good. I am curious, without getting too political, what's your stand on, we had these different laws and we had these different problems at the border, and now all of a sudden our military's at the border to help seal up the border. Do you think that that's going to be beneficial? I mean, obviously you're still going to have a lot of work to do within our country and to keep drugs off of the street. But I am kind of curious, since all the news headlines right now have to do with border closings, keep the, illegals out. What's your stance?
Well, I'm not political, but I'm going to give you my opinion on this. And first of all, I can absolutely demonize these cartels and China and all these traffickers and all these evil people that are wreaking havoc on our societies. But at the end of the day, we have to control the demand. Until we eliminate the demand for drugs, we'll always have bad actors willing to exploit us. Mm-hmm. The United States makes up a little over 4% of the world's population, yet we have most drug consumption in this country. So that's ultimately the solution. Is we gotta reduce the demand. But as far as the border goes, I'm excited to see what's going to happen. I am. The argument has been that the people coming over the border aren't bringing fentanyl, and they're correct. A lot of them aren't. The problem, though, is when you dive into the numbers and you dive into the work, our resources are so thin because of that. I was down on the border from 2009 to 2016 with DEA. I was down there a lot. Our office was in Corpus, but most of our work was along the border. So I'm very familiar with how things operate there and how the cartels operate there. And during my time down there, 250, 300,000 people a year were crossing the border illegally, and which is a lot, right?
Yeah.
Over the last 3-4 years, that number has increased to 1.5 to 2 million. And I can tell you that the Customs and Border Patrol and all the law enforcement agencies down there haven't increased their organizational size. They're doing a lot more with a lot less. So yes, I can appreciate the discussion or the position that a lot of these folks aren't bringing fentanyl or illicit things with them over the border. I get that, but the problem is if I'm a boss and I have limited resources and they are tied up with this nonsense, then it does prevent me from going after the fentanyl, going after the guns, going after the other criminal activity. And that's the problem. So I'm positive about this. I hope it's a good thing. Mm-hmm. And that's not a political stance. That's just, right. I want what's best for America. I want what's best for our communities. Mm-hmm. So if our resources, our law enforcement assets can concentrate or have more time to devote resources to the criminal activity because there's less of the other stuff, well, that's a win-win for America, and we should all stand behind that. And I'll say something else about the border. We've been securing our border since 1924, 100 years. This has been supported by both parties. It's been funded by both parties. We may not have called them walls before, but we called them barriers. We drones, sensors, cameras. We use a lot of technology, and we've been doing this since 1924. So this isn't a new thing, but we always confuse border security and immigration. And I know that they run parallel. I get that, but you could actually believe in open immigration, but you can also believe in border security. That's not a new thing. It's not a political thing, but sadly, over the last couple of years, we've made it into a political thing. So it's really difficult to have the discussion without people getting emotional, without people getting angry. And I think that's a disservice to all of us, because we can find common ground and we can look for solutions. And like I said, at the end of the day, secure America and make our communities and safer again. And that's ultimately what we should be doing, right?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And it is kind of funny because I even hate using the word political, but it has been a lot of controversy there, with these terms being thrown into the political arena, and they really shouldn't be. We are going to take a quick commercial break and come back. I have some more questions for you.
When the world watched the heartbreaking withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021, lives were shattered, families were displaced, and children were left with nothing but uncertainty. Out of that chaos came a mission of duty and compassion to stand by those who once stood with us. The Black Feather Foundation is committed to helping refugee children heal and thrive. Through sports, health, and education programs, we're giving these children a chance to dream again, to become citizens and leaders of tomorrow. This is a call to action. How you can help. Visit our website, theblackfeatherfoundation.org.
All right, welcome back. So one question I ask all of my guests, Brian, is what is one trial you've had in your life and how did you overcome it? And it could be, working as a DEA agent. It could be nonprofit work, your personal life, whatever, just any struggle. And sometimes, quite frankly, people will get on the show and say, I've had this struggle for years and I still can't figure it out. And that's okay too.
Recently it's been taking on too much. And that's something that I'm currently and dealing with. I don't micromanage the process and I don't try to own everything, but I'm wearing a lot of hats. And I had a discussion with a colleague yesterday. We were flying back from Chicago and we were talking about another project that we want to do to expand only 2MG and the work we're doing with fentanyl awareness and drug awareness. And I think we're going to be able to start the path down or work on that particular idea, but then it made me think of the greater, that's the word I'm looking for, with the greater things I'm working on, right? All the hats, if you will, that I'm wearing. And I think that's a struggle I've been dealing with a lot right now is am I too thin, right? If I spread myself out too thin where I can't give the appropriate time and attention to the things that I need to get done. So yeah, I'd say that's a current one. I have a lot in my life that I think we learn from our mistakes, and if we don't, then we're doing it wrong.
Mm-hmm. It's funny you brought that up. I have a little channel on Instagram, and that's something I talked about this morning. I'm guilty of it too. And a lot of my friends who are in different leadership positions, we're all kind of struggling with that. There's so much in the world, I think, that needs to be done. And now with social media, and it's so easy just to flip on the TV and see all of the things going on in the world outside of your home. It's like, where do you even start? And I think some of us are also at an age, I know for me, I'm, in my 50s and I want to leave a legacy. And so it's like, I feel like I'm on limited time, I'm half over with my life. What do I do next? And I have to do all these things, but we neglect ourselves, right?
Yeah, we do.
Families. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have to, it's almost a work life or a balance, whatever the categories, whatever the buckets are, it's a balance, and you have to have that balance in life. And another thing I do is I do a lot of leadership training. Something else I'm very passionate about, and we talk about that quite a bit, is having that balance. Finding the time, the appropriate time to give to the things that are important to you, and making sure that that you show up and that you give 100% to whatever that is, whatever those buckets are.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Good point. I'm just kind of thinking here. When it comes to these drugs, I'm just kind of meshing these two things together, right? We get so busy and we're all over the place and we're trying to do new things and trying to even stay awake. Sometimes I met somebody not that long ago who decided to try cocaine because he thought that he would have more energy. All his friends were talking about it. And I'm like, dude, look at those friends who are telling you that, like where they're at right now. And this was a really successful business owner. And people don't realize how toxic these drugs can be. But what are some of the things that you think are going through somebody's head when they do decide to try drugs, for example? Like me, the way I was raised, literally my dad would always say, like, you wouldn't have to worry about the drugs taking you out if you tried drugs. And so I was like scared to death. And maybe that's not the exact right approach, but it worked for me. It
works for a lot of young people.
Yeah. Yeah. But what do you think is causing our citizens to want to try drugs in the first place? To me, that's a scary thing to even want to try something like drugs, Well,
there are a lot of reasons, especially our young people. Sometimes it's just quite simply boredom. Sometimes it's just peer pressure. They're in peer groups and they've succumbed to the pressure of trying new things. But often, and this is a discussion that we're really not having much in this country, often it's because of some type of trauma or some type of illness, that whether it's sexual trauma, emotional trauma, physical trauma, or abuse, it's a coping mechanism. They're trying to deal with it. And when you look at how do we help people that are struggling from addiction, struggling from substance use disorder, well, the best way is a medicated assisted treatment. Well, first of all, what that means is you want to wean them off the actual drug. Like people probably heard of like methadone, the methadone clinics. And what they're doing is they're trying to wean them off the heroin. And we do the same thing with fentanyl now with those same types of drugs, Suboxone, other things. But that's only half the solution. So you obviously want to wean them off the drug, but then you want to look at the cognitive behavior. Why are they using the drug? Is there some type of abuse? Is there some type of trauma? How do we prevent them from not picking up the drug again and trying to cope with those things that are in their life? And again, I think that's the broader discussion that we're really not tackling in this country are those things. And to me, that's the biggest answer that I can give you, or the biggest chunk of the answer I can give you, is those people that are using drugs for those reasons. And then the small pieces of that pie chart would be, like I said, boredom, peer pressure, the false sense that's going to give them, like you said, more energy, like your friend said, all those things. But deep down, I think there's some things going on in their lives, in their brain, and that they're struggling to deal with. And they find that drugs and alcohol are a way of coping with them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I'm in the DC area right now, and down by the metro stations, you see people walking around and screaming, and there's a lot of mental illness down there. There's a lot of drugs too. And recently, we've seen more people who are definitely addicted to drugs, and they're just kind of walking around, even though it's freezing cold outside. And they literally look like they're zombies or something. They're grabbing at stuff in the air. And like I said, I realize there are some mental illnesses, but I was talking to a friend of mine who lives in Florida, and he said that they have a clinic that treats people who are on drugs who are doing these things. So I just realized not too long ago that, and I figured some of it was drugs, but I realized that there's actually a bigger amount of drugs causing that than sometimes like a schizophrenia or something like that. And that seems very dangerous to have these people just on the street. Is it because there's just so much of the drugs, or what is the deal? Why do we have so many people walking around acting like this and taking these drugs? Is it, like you said, I could guess all day. Is it because there's just not enough enforcement resources? Like, what is it?
Yeah, for sure. And let me back up real quick. We're also adding a lot of other drugs and chemicals to drugs like fentanyl. I mean, fentanyl is cut quite a bit with a drug called xylazine, and xylazine's nickname is trank or zombie drug. So it will give the impression that someone looks like a zombie. Their legs might be a little wide, and they're kind of bent over at the waist, and their heads down, and they almost look like they're sleeping, standing up with their hands just draped in front of them. And but the greater answer there is we're not committing the resources that we should be committing to help people.
Thank you so much for being on the show. Do you have social media at all, or just go to your websites and then we can find it later?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably, sorry, Meta, but I'm not huge on Facebook. I'm on Instagram, but it's not really anything. I need to update my business stuff on there, but I really don't. LinkedIn, I'm pretty much on LinkedIn every day. I have my own LinkedIn page, just Brian Townsend.
So Brian, thank you again for being such an amazing guest, and thank you for all you're doing to help our country. It's so important. Your work is not going unnoticed. So thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Wake Up with Patti Catter. If you enjoyed these stories of resilience and leadership, visit patticatter.com to connect with Patti and learn more. Until next time, stay inspired and keep pushing forward.